Hello everyone. In this video, you're going to learn about the REST API in WordPress. What in the world is the REST API? Well, I have some beds here because that's where you take a REST. And the REST API is going to let you blow up any expectations of what you thought was possible with JavaScript and the front end and dynamic data in WordPress. Here's the finished product of what you and I are going to build together in this video. So it's a block type, and I can begin to type into it. And if I type in lorem, all three of my blog posts match that. But if I search for just like the word second, you only see second post. Or if I search for third, if I search for first, you get the idea. So this is not waiting for a full page refresh. This is client-side JavaScript, and it's fetching dynamic data on the fly. So this is what we're going to code together in this video, but how is this possible? It's all thanks to the REST API in WordPress. What is the REST API? Well, any WordPress website by default has the REST API enabled. So the NASA website uses WordPress. Here is a URL. So at the end of any WordPress website, unless they've disabled it, you can tack on a /wp-json/wp/v2. And then there are all sorts of different endpoints, but this is a good example, just posts. This is raw JSON data for their most recent posts. The same thing for the Sony PlayStation blog. It uses WordPress, so if you tack on this to the ending URL, here is raw data. Sometimes it helps to view it in Firefox because Firefox sort of formats it and helps you understand what you're looking at. You can collapse all or expand all, but like here are the three blog posts from the NASA website. You can expand one. Each one has these different properties like link, title, content. And again, here's the API data for the PlayStation blog. But your website is no different. So in this WordPress series on this YouTube channel, we've been building a WordPress website with different plugins and blocks and themes. So you have a local domain, right? And you can tack on at the end of your local domain just WP-JSON, WP, V2 posts. And here we have it, right? Now, here's the fun part. At the end of that URL, so after posts, if I say like search equals bean, because I have a post called bean salad. If I search for that, let me bring that URL over to Firefox, but you can see it returns just one result. The one result is my blog post that has a title of bean salad. So the idea is that we can just write client-side JavaScript that visits the appropriate endpoint based on whatever the user is searching for. So in this video, you and I are going to write custom JavaScript together. We're going to build a block type. We can call it like our cool search. But let's go ahead from this point forward. Let's start bringing this experience to life. Let's create a new plugin. So in your WP content folder, dig into plugins, and then just create a brand new empty folder. So this one is completely empty. We can follow along together, but I named it our-cool-search. And then just open up that brand new empty folder in VS Code. If you're not sure like how to even find these files, someone's weed eating 2 inches outside my window, but if you're not sure how to find these files or what VS Code is or how to have a local dev environment, that's okay. Just visit the playlist as a whole. This is a series on my YouTube channel where we learn how to do all of that, but it's outside the scope of this video, right? But go ahead and open up our brand new folder in VS Code. Cool. So with that folder in VS Code, open up your command line with Control or Command J and run this command with me. I'm going to paste it in, but it's just npx @WordPress/create block @latest. And then I'm making up a name of best search ever, and then a space, -- variant, and then it's split up onto the next line, but it's -- variant dynamic, and then -- target dir, and then a space, and then a period for just the current directory that we're already in. I'll try to include this in the YouTube video so you can just copy and paste it, but go ahead and press enter. Once it finishes, you'll now have these files, and in your terminal, now we just want to say npm start, and that will just run forever in the background. It's going to watch us for any changes we make and automatically bundle up and compile our files. Here's what we're going to do though. Jump into the src folder, and then we have the nested best search ever, but jump into block.json. So we don't need to change the short name, but title. This is the human readable name that will show up as you're searching for blocks in the Gutenberg editor. Let's change that to like really great search, right? Just a human readable looking title. You can save that. And now let's go enable that plugin. So from your dashboard, if you go under plugins, here I see the one that's not activated yet, best search ever. Just click activate. And now if I go into my first post, like my hello world post, and edit that, and if I just, look for a new block type, So /, and if I just look for the term search, here it is, this one with smiley face. Really great search. I can click on that. I can click save. If I view this post on the front end, there we see it. Now, obviously, you and I are going to customize this to not just look like this blue box. We're not going to worry about the admin editor experience. You can leave this as just a placeholder. But for the remainder of this video, let's write client-side public-facing JavaScript to turn this into a live search box. To do that, we would just start working on two files. So back in SRC Best Search Ever, we're interested in render.php and view.js. Let's start with render.php. You can delete everything in this file, and let's just have a div. Looks like my tab trigger is not working. Let's just spell it out manually. So a div. Let's give it a class of our cool search. Inside the div, let's have an input with a type of text. And then below that, let's have a div with a class of results. So close out that div. So inside our overall div, we just have an input and then one nested div. So you can save that. And if we refresh, obviously that's what we see here. Now, for the remainder of this video, we're just going to write code in our view.js file. You can delete everything in this file. And essentially, we're just going to write JavaScript so that anytime the value of this field changes, we hit up the REST API and show the results. We format it into HTML, and we show the results in that div that had a class of results. So our first step back in view.js would be to select that input element. However, what about the scenario where someone has multiple instances of this block type? So in other words, like what if someone had, like a second instance and a third instance, right? So if I save that, right now there are 3 inputs. So how can we write our JavaScript so that each instance is only watching, like when I type into this field, I don't want that to also, trigger an event for this instance and the third instance. So let me show you how I personally approach this. In our view.js, the first thing I'm going to do is say const, and let's make up a name. Let's call it like all searches equals. And then I'm just going to say document.query selector all, and just, quotes, and it had a class of .our cool search. So this way, even if there's only one instance or if there's 20 instances, we now have a collection of all of them. And then I would just loop through that. So all searches .for each, parentheses to call for each. Let's have a parameter of like L, short for element, like the specific element that you've looped to. And then just arrow symbol. And we haven't created this function yet. We'll create it in 2 seconds from now. But let's call it like bring search to life. Call that function, but in the parentheses, give it the current element that's been looped through. So now, down here, we can just create a function with this matching name. So function bring search to life, parentheses, curly brackets. In the parentheses, receive the specific element that we're talking about. And now we can just write our code to target this. And that's the wrapper div, right? But this is now dynamic. So whether you have 1 instance of the block or 100 instances of the block on the same page, now our code is really flexible and can handle that. So now in this function, that's where we would select the input element. So instead of saying document.query selector, check this out. You can say l.query selector. So this is going to look inside the specific wrapper div. And then we're just looking for the element, so quotes, that matches the selector, so the input element, and then .add event listener. We're going to give that 2 things, A, B. The first thing is the change that we're listening for. So like on click, on hover, let's say on input. So this is anytime its value changes. And then for the placeholder B, this will be a function. We can create this function in 10 seconds from now. Let's just call it like handle change. And then below that line, but still inside the overall function of bring search to life, let's just say function handle change, parentheses, curly brackets. And before we worry about the REST API, let's just try to log to the console whatever value the user has currently typed into the field. So in the parentheses for handle change right here, we need to say E, short for event, so that way we can access the element that triggered it, so we can access its value. So let's say like const our clean value, and just set that to equal, and then it's going to be e.target.value. But what I would do, just to play it extra safe, just to make sure that it doesn't break the request, I would strip out like a space or a percentage sign or anything that would mess up the URL scheme. So I would just wrap this inside of encode URI component. So then parentheses, but just opening parentheses and then wrap it e.target value, so then closing parentheses. Cool. And then below that, let's just say console.log our cleaned value. So save that. If I refresh, open up my browser's console, just right click and choose inspect, and then click on the console tab. And if I start saying A, B, C, let me zoom in a little bit down here, but awesome. So it's working just as expected. So now we just want to take that current value after every keystroke and search the REST API endpoint. Now, before we go any further in this video, I want to say that in the real world, you would want to throttle or debounce this. You wouldn't want to hit up your server with a request after each and every keystroke, but I'm trying to keep this video bite-sized. So for extra credit at the end of this video, definitely, you can ask ChatGPT or Google, but like, how would I wait for the user to stop typing for maybe, 700 milliseconds, and then only once they've stopped typing, then take the input and run the search? That way, you're not flooding your server with 30 requests, right? Like after every keystroke, but you get the idea. That can be extra credit. Anyways, back in our code, now that we've logged that to the console, you can keep that if you want to. I'm going to get rid of that. What we would want to do now inside that same function is just load a URL from the REST API. So let's create a variable. Let's say like const result promise equals await. And then the browser has a built-in function called fetch. You just give it quotes and then the URL that you want to fetch data from. So you can start with a slash just for the current domain that you're already on, and then just tack on wp-json slash wp slash v2 slash posts, and then question mark search equals. Now for now, let's just say X as a placeholder, but here's how we're going to make that dynamic. Instead of quotes, so at the very start of that, let's actually use the backtick symbol. This is to the left of your one key or above your tab key. And also, like instead of the closing quote, it would also be the backtick symbol. Inside of backticks, we can do something dynamic now. So instead of X, we can say $ curly brackets. And now we can pull in a JavaScript expression or variable. And let's just say, what do we call it? Like our clean value. Now, you might see that your VS Code is underlining the word of await. This is because you can only use this inside of an async function. So all we need to do when we're saying function handle change, just right before the word function, just type in async, just like this. So async function, handle change, cool. Now, below this line where we're fetching, you can just say const results equals, and then await result promise, look inside that and call the JSON method. What this means now is that on this line of code, we will actually have the results ready. So if you wanted to, you could log those to the console for a quick test, like console.log results. You can save that, hit refresh, and now if I search for bean, like bean salad, well, you can see it ran after every keystroke, but the final most recent one just has one post. You can dig into it. Let's look for the title. Yes, so title has a nested property of rendered, but there we see bean salad. Let me instead search for chocolate because I have a post called chocolate chip. If I look inside there, there's just one item and its title is chocolate chip cookie. Cool, so it's working perfectly. Now what we need to do is just take this raw JSON and instead sort of build some HTML based on the raw JSON and display the results here. And we want each one to be a link that you can click on and it would take you to the URL for just that one specific post. Now there's a million different ways that you could format HTML based on JSON, but here's what I would do. I no longer need the console.log, but right after we're setting const results, I would just say if, and parentheses, curly brackets, if results.length, if that's true. So as long as there are results. In other words, if there were no results, this would be 0, which would evaluate to false. But let's also have an else block. And then if this is true, I want to output that into the results. If it's not true, I want to zero out or like empty out the results area. So either way, we're just going to say, instead of document.querySelector, L.querySelector. This is one of my favorite parts of JavaScript when I realized that you could do this instead of document.querySelector. So it's going to look only inside of that specific element that we're already in. This is great. But we would just search for, quotes, we called it results, or it had a class of results. And then look inside that, and we're going to set its inner HTML property to equal something. So equals. Now I would duplicate what we have so far into the else block. And if there are no results, then just set it to nothing, just an empty pair of quotes. If there are results though, this is where we would want to create like a big block of HTML where there's like a paragraph or a heading level 3 with an A element link inside it. Like we want to convert the JSON into HTML that makes sense. Now, I like to create functions that have single responsibilities. So what I would do is say that that should equal, and let's create a function in like 5 seconds from now. Let's say like generate HTML, parentheses to call it. We can have this function return the exact value that we want it to return, but in these parentheses, just give it results. Now, let's just go create a function. So not nested in anything we currently have going. So just completely separate, just function. And with that matching name, we called it generate HTML, parentheses, curly brackets. In the parentheses, receive that parameter, so results. And now the only job of this function is to return a giant string of HTML. There are so many different ways that you could construct this string of HTML, but let's say like let big HTML equal, just start with an empty string. And then we know down here that's eventually what we're going to return. So like return big HTML. And then before that though, this is where I would just loop through results. So like results dot for each, parentheses, let's call each result item arrow symbol. I'm going to have multiple lines, so I'll have curly brackets you can drop down, and then I would just say big HTML plus equal sign. This is how you add something onto it. Now I want to spell out like an HTML template, but inside of regular quotes, you cannot drop down to separate lines. However, inside of backticks, you can. So this is where I like to use, a starting backtick, a closing backtick. In between there, you can drop down. So we could say like, each one should have a div, and then inside the div, you could drop down. And then, each one could have like a heading level 3. And inside of that, each one would have like an href, like an A sandwich. And then, but this is where you want to start making it dynamic. So inside the A sandwich, this is where the title of the blog post should appear. So $ curly brackets, you can do something dynamic. And then just look inside the current item for title dot rendered. Okay, and then the href value, that should be something dynamic. So instead of hashtag $ curly brackets, this would just be item.link. Let's give this a save and test it out. So if I refresh, and in the first one, if I search for chocolate, awesome, there's the result. I can click on it to visit that specific blog post. Let me go back really quick. But like in this second one, if I search for bean, awesome, you can see each one is independent and working just with their instance. If I search for lorem, which should return a lot of results, beautiful, right? Or if I search for Greek salad, you get the idea. So our job here is done, but before we close out the video, I want to talk a little bit about front-end security and just making sure that your JavaScript is robust and secure. Let me show you a really quick example of what I want to protect against. Like if I go into my bean salad post, and if I click on to code editor, so in these top right 3 dots, click code editor. And for example, like in the title field, instead of bean salad, what if you could type this in if you wanted to, but like bean and then a strong tag on mouse over alert hi. So I'm trying to execute JavaScript. Like imagine if someone could add a malicious value to your title. So like if I click save, and then I refresh and, I search for bean salad, when I hover over that, the word salad, it executes. This is game over in terms of security. Now, I realize before we get too far into this and how I would fix this, this isn't really the fault of our JavaScript. I mean, it is and it isn't, because currently, like if you just went to that blog post, right, like the individual URL for bean salad, and you hover over salad, the JavaScript is executing. This means that this has nothing to do with JavaScript, like our JavaScript code that we wrote just in WordPress, right? Like it's actually rendering that as real HTML, real JavaScript. So this might not even be considered a security threat in this specific instance, because I think WordPress is set up in a way to where, the only person that can add a title to your post is the owner of the website, and maybe they should have the ability to add HTML or JavaScript. I'm just trying to include this as a public service announcement. So let me go back to the post with our custom block type. Just in general, maybe even outside this specific example, if you're working with user-generated values, I want to show you how you can protect yourself in the land of JavaScript. So imagine I wanted to keep this value of bean salad, but I didn't want that on mouse over to work. Here's what you would do. Personally, there's nothing wrong with this approach of how we're concatenating JavaScript, but if you're going to be using user-generated values and you still want to be safe, you would absolutely need to install package. So I'm going to say Control-C down in the command line and install this with me. You can say npm install DOMPurify, all one word, all lowercase, just DOMPurify. hit enter, and then you would want to be sure to run npm start again. But now up at the very top of view.js, you would just say import DOMPurify from quotes DOMPurify. And then down in our function, our generate HTML, instead of just returning big HTML, you would return DOMPurify, look inside it for a method called sanitize, and then you would give that, what, big HTML. And that's what you're returning. So now you can save that, and if I refresh and search for bean, now even when I hover over the bold salad tag, that on mouse over is not working. In this case, I wouldn't even worry about that threat, that cross-site scripting attack threat, because if someone did get malicious value into your title field, well, the WordPress PHP system itself would also be exposed to that threat. But I'm just showing you how to go above and beyond that and make sure that your JavaScript is rock solid. So personally, anytime I'm constructing a string of HTML and I'm using user-generated values or dynamic values, I just instinctively reach for DOMPurify. Cool, that is going to bring this video to a close. If you're enjoying this series and you want to help support this YouTube channel, the best thing you can do is visit my website, learnwebcode.com. From there, you'll find my various links. You can check out my Patreon. The top perk is to get your name featured in the closing credits of these videos. There's a similar perk system through YouTube channel memberships. I have various courses that are available on both Teachable and Udemy. You can learn anything from advanced WordPress development, Laravel, JavaScript, React, front-end development, MySQL, so on and so forth. For the last 19 years, I've used DreamHost to host my WordPress websites. I've had great experiences with DreamHost. And if you use my affiliate link to visit DreamHost and sign up, I will receive compensation for sending new users their way. That's a great way to help support this YouTube channel. You can join my email newsletter. You can follow me on various social media, and that's about it. Thank you so much for watching this video until the very end. I hope you feel like you learned something. And in our very next video, we're going to start talking about deploying and staging your WordPress website to a real host. And I'll give you a hint. We're going to use a silky smooth Git-powered workflow. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video. This video was made possible by my supporters on Patreon and YouTube memberships. I don't have any producers yet, but your name could go here. But I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Rodney, David, Linas, Demetris, Kenneth, and Sinathri for being sponsor tier members over on Patreon. Really appreciate that support. Take care, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.